She pretended to be poor for 6 months to test her boyfriend. When Grace stood up in the middle of her engagement dinner and said, "I have something to confess," Thomas nearly choked. Every guest fell silent. She took a deep breath. "I've been lying to you about who I really am." Champagne glasses paused midair. The silence cut through the room like a blade. The aroma of white roses mingled with the expensive perfume of the guests. The mahogany table reflected the flickering candlelight. Grace felt her simple cotton dress contrast sharply with the diamonds surrounding her. Her hands were trembling slightly. Catherine, her future mother-in-law, let her fork drop onto the porcelain plate. The noise echoed like a gunshot. Thomas blinked 3 times, confused. Jessica, her best friend, held her breath. But Grace wasn't just there to get married. For 6 months, she had pretended to be poor, not for money, not for fame. She did it because she needed to know if Thomas would love her for who she truly was. And the truth about her identity would change everything they all thought about that relationship forever. Catherine frowned because she had suspected her future daughter-in-law for months, and her investigations had proven her right. Jessica bit her lip because she knew about the plan from the beginning and had lied right along with her. David, Tom's brother, smiled discreetly because he always thought Grace was hiding something, and it was finally about to be revealed. 3 people, 3 secrets, 3 reasons for the night to explode. But this story didn't begin there, at that elegant table. It began 6 months earlier, when Grace made the riskiest decision of her life. A decision based on a betrayal from her past that had forever changed the way she saw love. And what happened in those 6 months was more complex than anyone imagined. To understand how Grace got here, you need to know 3 stories. The story of how she met Thomas, the story of why she decided to lie about her identity, and the story of how she discovered that true love has a price not everyone is willing to pay. It all started on a Tuesday morning. Subscribe now and hit that notification bell urgently so you don't miss any story that could transform your life. Thousands of women over 50 are already part of this special community. 6 months earlier, Grace woke up at 5:30 every morning, not out of obligation, but out of habit. At 52, she had built a routine that protected her from the chaos of the world. She lived in a simple apartment in Astoria, Queens, on the 3rd floor of a walk-up building. Brown hair always tied in a low bun, hands manicured but without polish, discreet clothes that didn't draw attention. She was the kind of woman you'd see in a bank line and forget the next day, but Grace preferred it that way. She was known in the neighborhood as the woman who never refused to help. Neighbors knocked on her door when they needed a prescription explained or an important letter translated. Grace had studied business administration in her youth, worked in small companies her whole life, never married. Her most defining quality was her absolute loyalty to the people she loved. Her flaw was believing everyone deserved a second chance even when they didn't. This had already cost her dearly in the past. When Grace was 28, she discovered her fiancé was cheating on her with her best friend. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was that he had told her she didn't have enough class for his family. Those words created a wound that never fully healed. Since then, Grace had built invisible walls around her heart. Relationships lasted a few months. She always found an excuse to end things before they got serious. She protected herself from pain, but she also isolated herself from happiness. What Grace truly wanted more than anything was to be loved exactly as she was. Without needing to change, without needing to pretend, without needing to be richer, thinner, younger. In her dresser drawer, she kept an old photo of her parents, he, a factory worker, she, a seamstress, poor, but they looked at each other as if they were the only 2 people in the world. Grace wanted that. A love that saw through appearances, possessions, status. A true love. It was on a rainy Thursday in March that Grace met Thomas. She was in line at the bank, soaked, holding a broken umbrella. The man in front of her turned and offered his. "You're drenched," he said with a genuine smile. Thomas was 45, with kind brown eyes and a well-trimmed beard. He wore an expensive suit, but without pretension. When she hesitated to accept, he insisted. "Please, my mother would kill me if she knew I let a lady get soaked." "I'm no lady," Grace replied, but she took the umbrella. "Everyone is someone special," he said. Grace felt something she hadn't felt in years. Connection. A genuine interest in his eyes. It wasn't pity. It wasn't empty politeness. It was true curiosity. "Thomas Sinclair," he introduced himself. "But please call me Tom." "Grace. Grace Thompson. Can I buy you a coffee, Grace Thompson? Just to make sure you warm up properly?" 3 days later, they were on their second date. Thomas seemed different from any man Grace had ever known. He asked about her dreams, listened to her answers, remembered small details from previous conversations. When she mentioned she loved old movies, he showed up at the next date with tickets for a special screening of Casablanca. When she commented that she worked a lot and barely cooked, he brought her a homemade casserole his mother had prepared. You don't have to do this, Grace said, touched. It's not an obligation, Thomas replied. It's a pleasure. On the third date, Grace made a decision that would change everything. They were walking around the reservoir in Central Park when Thomas stopped and took her hands. Grace, I need to tell you something. I really like you, and I want you to know you can trust me. I'm a simple man with flaws, but I'm honest. I promise I will always treat you with respect. Grace looked into his eyes and saw sincerity. But she also saw something that frightened her. Expectation. What if she wasn't what he expected? What if, like before, he discovered she wasn't good enough? I like you too, she said, but I need time. Thomas smiled. All the time in the world. It was at that moment that Grace decided to test him. Not consciously, not as an elaborate plan. It was an instinctive decision, born of fear and the need for self-preservation. Thomas's world was different from hers. She discovered this when he invited her for Sunday lunch. The Sinclair family home was on the Upper East Side, a massive townhouse with a private garden and doorman. When Grace arrived by subway, she felt small before the sheer scale of the place. The doorbell chimed a classical melody. A housekeeper greeted her and led her to the main drawing room. The smell of lemon oil and old money mixed with the aroma of fresh flowers from the garden. Genuine leather sofas, Persian rugs, oil paintings in gilt frames. Every object screamed wealth in an elegant but intimidating way. Grace realized her outfit's simple black trousers and a white blouse was completely out of place. She felt like an intruder in a museum. Thomas greeted her with a kiss on the cheek and a wide smile. You look beautiful, he said, and he seemed sincere, but Grace noticed the way his eyes quickly scanned her clothes. There was no judgment, just registration, as if he was trying to understand who she was through what she wore. Thomas's mother, Catherine, greeted Grace with cold politeness. A woman in her 60s with perfect posture and discreet but expensive jewelry. The kind of woman who had never known financial hardship. Her eyes analyzed Grace from head to toe in seconds, cataloging every detail. The no-name shoes, the synthetic handbag, the absence of any jewelry beyond a simple watch. Thomas has told us so much about you, Catherine said. It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person. The words were cordial, but the tone was ice. Grace caught the unspoken message. You don't belong here. During lunch, the questions came disguised as polite conversation. Where do you work, dear? Which borough do you live in? Is your family from New York? Each of Grace's answers was met with, and how interesting that sounded, like how unfortunate. Thomas tried to ease the tension by changing the subject, but the discomfort hung over the table like a heavy fog. It was there, at that mahogany table, surrounded by wealth and silent judgment, that Grace began to feel the first signs of what was to come. The way Catherine treated her, the way David, Tom's younger brother, completely ignored her, the way Thomas, without realizing it, explained basic things to her as if she couldn't possibly understand his world. It wasn't malice, it was worse than that, it was condescension. When Thomas walked her to the subway station, Grace was quiet. My family can seem a bit formal at first, he said, but they'll love you when they get to know you better. Grace forced a smile. I'm sure, but inside a voice whispered, what if they never accept me? What if Thomas also changes when he finds out who I really am? It was precisely this insecurity that would lead Grace, in the following weeks, to make the most dangerous decision of her life. A decision that would test not only Thomas's love, but also her own capacity for trust. And what happened from that moment on would change them both forever. 2 weeks after the lunch at the Sinclairs, Grace was having coffee with Jessica when she made the decision that would change everything. It was a Saturday morning, and they always met at the same place, a small diner in Astoria, far from the prying eyes of the neighborhood. Jess, I need to tell you something, Grace said, stirring her coffee for the 5th time. From the way you're abusing that coffee, it must be serious, Jess replied. At 48, she was the only person in the world Grace trusted completely. Friends since high school, they had been through divorces, family deaths, romantic disappointments. Jess had wild curly hair, an easy smile, and the rare ability to listen without judging. I'm going to test Thomas. Test him how? Grace took a deep breath. I'm going to pretend I'm poor. Poorer than I actually am. Jess nearly spit out her coffee. Have you lost your mind? Listen, Grace leaned forward, lowering her voice. You saw how his family treated me. His mother looks at me like I'm a gold digger. His brother barely acknowledges me. And Tom ... Tom is kind, but ... double quotes. She paused, searching for the right words. He explains things to me. Obvious things. As if I can't understand his world. Grace, that's insane. Relationships are built on truth. What if he only wants me because I'm acceptable? What if he finds out I'm even simpler than he imagines and disappears? What if he finds out you lied and disappears? Grace was silent for a moment. Outside, the morning bustle of the city continued, cars honking, Vendors shouting, kids walking to school. Normal life. But inside her, a storm was brewing. I need to know if he loves me or if he loves the idea he has of me. Jess sighed. And how do you plan to do this? I'm going to tell him I lost my job, that I'm in financial trouble. I'm going to see how he reacts when I actually need help. Grace. Jess, I'm 52 years old. I can't afford to give myself to someone who will abandon me when things get tough. The emotion in Grace's voice was palpable. Years of superficial relationships, of men who vanished when she showed vulnerability, of broken promises. Jess knew every one of those scars. How long? 6 months. If he's still with me in 6 months, I'll know it's real, and then I'll tell him the truth. Jess shook her head, but Grace could see in her friend's eyes that she understood. You're going to need my help. I am. Then I'm in. But Grace, promise me if this gets out of control, you'll stop it, I promise. They shook hands across the table. A sealed promise. An authorized lie. The beginning of 6 months that would test not only Thomas's love, but a lifelong friendship. 3 days later, Grace called Thomas. I need to see you, she said, and there was a genuine sadness in her voice that he caught immediately. What happened? I'd rather talk in person. They met at the same bench in Central Park where they'd first talked. The irony wasn't lost on Grace. She was about to tell her first major lie in the place where it had all begun with truth. Thomas arrived looking worried, hugging her before he even asked anything. Are you okay? Grace forced tears, which came more easily than she expected. I lost my job. What? How? The company's downsizing. They laid off half the admin staff. The words came out smoothly, rehearsed mentally on previous nights. I don't know what I'm going to do. Thomas pulled her closer. It's going to be okay. You'll find another job, Tom, you don't understand. I'm 52. Nobody hires someone my age easily. And I have bills to pay. Rent. Grace watched his face. She saw genuine concern, but also something else. A flicker of, what, fear? Inconvenience? She couldn't place it. How much do you have in savings? It's about 2 weeks' worth. Maybe 3 if I'm extremely careful. Thomas was silent for a moment that felt like an eternity. I'll help you. I can't accept that. Of course you can. We're in this together. But Grace noticed the hesitation in his voice, the way he avoided her eyes for a few seconds, the way he shifted, creating an almost imperceptible distance between them. Tiny signals that confirmed her fears. Thomas was not comfortable with the idea of a girlfriend in financial distress. Tom, if this is a problem for you, don't be ridiculous. It's just a rough patch. It'll pass. The words were right, but the tone was wrong. And Grace, after decades of observing the nuances of human behavior, caught every one of them. In the days that followed, the changes were subtle but noticeable. Thomas remained kind, remained attentive, but something was different. The dates became less frequent. Work is crazy right now, he'd say. The restaurants they went to became cheaper. I found this amazing, simple little place, he'd justify. The phone calls lessened. I've just been so busy, he'd explain. Grace mentally cataloged every change. They weren't deliberate cruelties. They were the unconscious adjustments of someone who wasn't prepared to deal with a partner in difficulty. It was Jess who first noticed something strange. Someone's been asking questions about you, she said during one of their secret meetings. What do you mean? A very well-dressed woman came into my shop asking about you. Wanted to know where you worked, how long we'd been friends, if you were seeing anyone else. Grace's heart sped up. Can you describe her? Perfectly cut gray hair, expensive suit, posture like she owns the place. Looked like a CEO. Catherine, his mother? Definitely. Grace felt a mix of indignation and triumph. Catherine was investigating, which meant she considered her a threat. But it also meant her suspicions about the family were right. She would never be accepted. What did you tell her? Confirmed you lost your job, that you're struggling, but that you're a person of integrity. I stuck to your story. Thank you. Grace, this is getting dangerous. If she's investigating ... double quotes, then it's working. 3 weeks into the charade, Thomas invited Grace to dinner. It wasn't a usual romantic date. He seemed nervous, picked a discreet location, arrived late. I need to talk to you about something, he said after they ordered. Grace's stomach tightened. What is it? My mother. She's been asking questions about you. What kind of questions? Thomas fiddled with his napkin, avoiding her eyes. About your financial situation. About your plans. About ... US. And, Grace, she thinks maybe it's too soon for us to get serious. With you going through this rough patch ... gold, she thinks I'm a gold digger. That's not what she said, but it's what she meant. Thomas sighed. My family is complicated. They're protective. They've seen people get close to me for the wrong reasons. And you? What do you think? It was the question that changed everything. Grace watched Thomas hesitate. watched him search for the right words, which meant the obvious words weren't the ones he wanted to say. I think I need to be sure of my feelings before I make any major decisions. Grace felt like she'd been punched in the gut. Sure of your feelings or sure of my financial situation? It's not like that. Then what is it like? Thomas fell silent, and in that silence, Grace had her answer. She rose from the table. I need to use the restroom. In the restaurant's bathroom, Grace looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes were red, but not from sadness, from anger. Anger that she had been right. Anger that Thomas was exactly who she had feared he was. Anger that she had let herself hope for something different. But she also felt something unexpected. Resolve. If Thomas was wavering now when she was only pretending to have problems, what would he do when faced with real hardship? She needed to know how far his love went. When she returned to the table, she forced a smile. Sorry, I'm just on edge lately. I completely understand. Tom, I want you to know I would never expect anything from you financially. I just want your emotional support. Of course. You can count on me. But Grace had already decided the test would continue, and it was about to get more intense than she had ever imagined. 2 weeks later, David showed up at Grace's apartment unannounced. She was coming home from the grocery store when she saw him in the lobby talking to the superintendent. Her heart hammered. Grace, what a coincidence. It was no coincidence. His smile was calculated, his eyes too analytical. David, what are you doing here? I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd drop by. A lie. Her neighborhood was miles from any place David would have any reason to visit. A nice apartment, he said when she, left with no choice, invited him up. Grace saw her home through his eyes, the cheap furniture, the old television, the complete lack of luxury. She felt shame, then anger at feeling ashamed. Coffee, please. As she made the coffee, David asked seemingly innocent questions. How long she'd lived there, if she planned on moving, how the job hunt was going. Every question was a disguised interrogation. Tom worries about you a lot, he said as she served the coffee. He's a good man. He is. Sometimes too good. Always helping people in need. The message was clear. You're just another charity case my brother has picked up. He told me you two have serious plans. Grace almost spit out her coffee. Thomas hadn't mentioned any serious plans recently. He did? Talked about moving in together. About marriage. It was a lie. It had to be. Thomas was pulling away, not moving closer. David was testing her reaction, trying to find out her true intentions. We're still talking about it, Grace said, keeping her voice neutral. Good, because it's important for you to know that Tom has family responsibilities. Our mother depends on him financially. The family business needs his attention. I understand. I just want to make sure you're not going to add more to his plate than he can already handle. Grace put her cup down on the table harder than she intended. David, I'm going to be direct. If you have something to say to me, say it. He smiled. I just want what's best for my brother. And you don't think I'm what's best for him. I didn't say that. You didn't have toe. David finished his coffee in silence. As he stood to leave, he paused at the door. Grace, you seem like a good person. Sometimes circumstances just don't align in our favor. After he left, Grace sat on the sofa and cried. Not from sadness, but from fury. Thomas's family was actively trying to push her away. And the worst part, Thomas probably knew. But what Grace didn't know was that Thomas had just found out something about her that would change the game completely. And in the days to come, the lie she had so carefully constructed would begin to unravel in ways she could never have imagined. The following week, it was Jess who brought the first real complication. They met at their usual diner. But this time, Jess looked different. Nervous. Agitated. I have to tell you something, Jess said, not even ordering coffee first. Grace felt her chest tighten. She'd known her friend long enough to recognize when something was seriously wrong. What is it? You remember Michael? Michael was Jess's ex-husband. They'd been divorced for 5 years, but kept in touch because of their daughter. I remember. Why? He's sick. Cancer. It's advanced. Grace took her friend's hand across the table. Jess thought that Lily is a wreck. It's her father, you know. And he asked me to take care of him in these last few months. Are you going to do it? Jess wiped away the tears that were starting to fall. I already am. He moved into the guest room last week. Grace, I know I don't love him anymore. I know I don't owe him anything, but, it's the humane thing, Grace finished. It's the right thing. But it means I can't help you as much as before. With the shop and him and Lily processing all of this, quotes. Grace hugged her friend. You've done so much for me already. Now it's my turn to be here for you. How are things with Thomas? Grace sighed. Complicated. His family is clearly trying to break us up. And he's pulling away. Maybe it's time to stop this. Not yet. 4 months to go. Grace. Jess, I have to be sure. If I give up now, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering. Jess shook her head but didn't argue. She had her own battles to fight now. When Grace walked home that afternoon, she felt the weight of her solitude. Jess was her only confidant, and now she would be too busy for their regular meetings. The plan that had seemed so clear at the start was now revealing its complications. She was alone in a lie that grew bigger every day. That night, Grace did something she hadn't done in years. She opened a bottle of wine and allowed herself to remember. Remember her father, who died when she was 23. Remember her mother, who followed him 5 years later. Remember the failed relationships, the broken promises, the times she thought she was being loved and discovered she was only being tolerated. The pain from that first fiancé, the one who said she didn't have enough class, returned with full force. Grace had pretended it hadn't marked her, but it had. Deeply. Every choice she'd made since to stay simple. To not stand out. To protect herself through invisibilities. Temmed from that old wound. Why can't I just trust? She asked the empty apartment aloud. The answer came back as silence. But Grace wasn't as alone as she thought. At that same moment, 20 miles away, Thomas was weathering his own emotional storm. He was in the study of his mother's townhouse, listening to Catherine list all the reasons Grace was unsuitable. She lost her job and immediately latched onto you. Don't you see the pattern? Mom, she hasn't asked me for a single dollar. Not yet. But she will. Women like that always do. Women like what? What kind of woman is like that? Catherine sighed, the way she always did when she thought Thomas was being naive. Son, you're 45 years old. You should know how the world works by now. People in financial distress make choices based on need, not love. You're judging Grace without even knowing her. I know enough. And more importantly, I had her investigated. Thomas felt his blood run cold. You did what? I hired someone to check her background. It's my right to protect my son. I am not a child. Stop acting like one. The silence that followed was thick, heavy with years of unmet expectations and mutual disappointments. Thomas loved his mother, but sometimes he felt that love was a gilded cage. What did the investigation find? He asked, hating himself for wanting to know. Nothing alarming. She is who she says she is. But also nothing impressive. Mediocre jobs, a rented apartment, no significant savings. At 52, Thomas. She should have built something by now. Not everyone had the privileges we did. Privileges I worked very hard to build, Catherine corrected. And which I will not see wasted on someone who adds nothing. Thomas stood up. Grace asterisk does asterisk add something. She makes me happy. For how long? Until the money runs out? You're being cruel. I'm being realistic. Thomas left, slamming the door. But his mother's words echoed. He hated to admit it, but a small, cowardly part of him agreed. Ever since Grace lost her job, something had changed. Not in her, but in him. He had started noticing things, her slightly worn clothes, her hesitation before ordering, the way she always picked the cheapest options on the menu. It wasn't repulsion, it was discomfort. Thomas had been raised to be a provider, but also to choose someone who didn't need providing for, and that contradiction was tearing him apart. But there was something else. Something Thomas hadn't told his mother or David. He was starting to fall in love with Grace for real. Despite the circumstances, despite his family, despite his own prejudices. There was something about her, a quiet strength, a dignity, that drew him in more than any woman before. And that scared him to death. Thomas's fear had a name. Vulnerability. For the first time in his life, he felt vulnerable. Falling for Grace meant confronting his own values, defying his family, and admitting that maybe what he'd always looked for, an appropriate partner, wasn't what he really needed. 2 weeks later, the rumors started. Grace noticed it first in the stairs people at the supermarket, neighbors in her building, acquaintances on the street. Whispers followed by sudden silences when she approached. It was her fourth-floor neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who finally told her, "Grace, honey, I don't know if I should be saying this, you can tell me." "Mrs. Rodriguez, people in the neighborhood are talking. They say you're dating a rich man, that you're using him, that you're pretending to be poorer than you are to get money." Grace felt the world spin. The irony was so absurd she almost laughed. They were accusing her of pretending to be poor when she was, in fact, pretending to be poor. Who's saying this? I don't know, but it's all over. At the salon, the pharmacy, the local market, Grace realized what had happened. Catherine hadn't just investigated. She was actively destroying her reputation. It was a classic strategy. Make her so socially undesirable that Thomas would be forced to end it. When she told Jess, her friend was furious. That woman is dangerous. You have to tell Thomas the truth now. Not yet. Grace, this is out of control. Jess, if I tell him now, I'll never know if he would have stayed with me through the hardship. I have to hold on a little longer. What if he believes the rumors? That was the question Grace didn't want to answer. Thomas did believe them. Not completely, but enough to confront her. They were walking along the East River when he finally brought it up. "Grace, I have to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." Her heart hammered. "What? Are you with me for my money?" Grace stopped walking. The sound of the river seemed distant. "How can you ask me that? People are saying things. My family's saying things. And I need to hear it from you. What things are they saying? That you're faking needing help? That you're manipulating the situation?" The irony was so thick, Grace wanted to scream the truth. But something held her back. Maybe pride. Maybe stubbornness. Maybe the need to see just how far Thomas would go based on trust alone. "If you have to ask, Thomas, then you already have your answer. That's not it. I'm just ... You're just what? You need confirmation that the poor woman you're dating isn't a gold digger." "Grace, don't twist my words. I don't have to. You've already twisted them yourself." She started walking quickly toward the bus stop. Thomas followed her. "Grace, stop. I didn't mean to offend you, but you did. I'm confused. My family, the rumors, all of it, ... quotes, and you believe them instead of believing me." Thomas was silent, and in that silence, Grace had her most painful answer yet. "I'll make this easy for you," she said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "If you have doubts about who I am, about my intentions, about my character, then we shouldn't be together. That's not what I want." "What asterisk do asterisk you want, Thomas?" He opened his mouth, but he couldn't answer, because he didn't know. He wanted Grace, but he wanted his family's approval. He wanted to trust, but he was afraid. He wanted love, but within safe parameters. "I need time," he finally said. Grace nodded. "Time is something I don't have an excess of." She got on the bus and didn't look back. But the next day, something unexpected happened. Thomas showed up at her apartment door with flowers and an envelope. "I came to apologize. And to bring you this." The envelope contained a check, enough for 6 months' rent. "I'm not accepting this," Grace said immediately. "Please, let me help." "Helping with money is easy, Tom. It's helping with trust that's hard. I'm trying to show you that I trust you. Money isn't trust. It's compensation for the lack of it." Thomas looked genuinely confused, as if he had never considered that money couldn't solve emotional problems. "Then tell me what to do." Grace looked at this man she loved in spite of everything. She saw his flaws, his fears, but also his genuine attempt to do the right thing, even if it was the wrong way. "Choose," she said simply. "Choose to trust me or don't. Choose to stand up to your family or don't. Choose to be with me despite the circumstances. Or don't, but choose." It was the first time Grace saw Thomas completely vulnerable. Tears in his eyes, hands shaking. "I choose you," he said. "But I need you to give me time to fix things with my family." "How much time?" 2 weeks. "I'm going to talk to my mother, to David. I'm going to make it clear that you are my choice." Grace wanted to believe him, but years of disappointment had taught her not to trust promises. 2 weeks, she agreed. But what Grace didn't know was that Catherine was already preparing the final blow. And in 3 days, not 2 weeks, everything would fall apart in a way neither of them could have predicted. Tell me in the comments which city you're watching this story from. I read them all and make a point to respond to each one with so much care. Leave a like if you're enjoying it. The phone call came on a Tuesday at 10 at night. Grace was about to fall asleep when her cell rang. Unknown number. "Hello, Grace Thompson?" The voice was female, cold, professional. "Yes. Who is this?" "My name is Miss Julia Vance. I'm the attorney for the Sinclair family. I need you to be at my office tomorrow at 3 p.m. It's urgent." "What is this about?" "I'd prefer to discuss it in person." The line disconnected before Grace could reply. She sat on her bed for long minutes, her heart hammering in her chest. An attorney. The Sinclair family was escalating things. She tried calling Thomas, but it went to voicemail 3 times. She tried Jess, but remembered her friend was at the hospital with Michael. She was alone. Grace didn't sleep that night. Every possible scenario ran through her head. Were they trying to make her sign some kind of agreement, threatening to sue her for something? Or worse, had they discovered some truth about her that even she didn't know? The next day, Grace arrived at the office 15 minutes early. It was a corporate high-rise on Park Avenue, all glass and steel, the kind of place that exuded power and money. She felt small in the mirrored elevator. Her simple dress reflected infinitely. Miss Vance's office was on the 20th floor. White walls, minimalist furniture, a stunning view of the city. And there, sitting in the visitor's chair, was Catherine Sinclair. Grace stopped at the door. "What is going on?" "Please, sit down," Miss Vance said, her professional tone leaving no room for refusal. Grace sat. Catherine didn't greet her, just looked at her with an expression mixing triumph and contempt. "Miss Thompson," the lawyer began, opening a file in front of her. "We were retained by Mrs. Sinclair to investigate your intentions regarding Thomas Sinclair." "My intentions?" "There is legitimate concern that you are taking advantage of Mr. Sinclair's kindness during a period of your own financial vulnerability. Grace felt the anger rise, hot and urgent. "I've never asked Thomas for money." "Not directly," Catherine spoke for the first time. "But your very presence in his life is a manipulation. Women like you always find indirect ways. Women like me? Opportunists. Unemployed with no prospects." Each word was a stab. Grace felt the air leave her lungs, her chest tighten. Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She would not give Catherine that satisfaction. "If this meeting is just to insult me, I can leave." "We're not finished," Miss Vance said. "We have a proposal." An envelope was slid across the desk. Grace didn't touch it. $50,000, Catherine said, "for you to end the relationship with my son and disappear from his life." The silence in the room was absolute. Grace looked at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. $50,000. More money than she would make in a year of working. Money that would solve all her problems. Money that would prove exactly what Catherine thought of her. "No, be reasonable," the lawyer interjected. "It's a generous amount. It's an insult." "It's a practical solution for everyone involved," Catherine said. "Thomas deserves someone on his level. You deserve financial stability. Everyone wins. Everyone except Thomas, who doesn't know you're doing this. My son is naive in matters of the heart. He always has been. Someone has to protect him." Grace stood up. "You're not protecting him. You're controlling him. Think hard before you refuse. $50,000 is a lot of money for someone in your situation. My situation is none of your business. Everything involving my son is my business." Grace grabbed her bag. But before leaving, she turned to Catherine. "Thomas will never forgive you when he finds out about this. He won't find out. And if you tell him, I'll deny it. Who do you think he'll believe? The mother who raised him, or the unemployed girlfriend?" The truth of those words hurt more than anything that had been said. Because Grace knew in her gut that Catherine was right. Thomas would choose his family. He would always choose his family. She left the office in a state of shock. She didn't remember calling the elevator or going down or walking out of the building. Suddenly she was on the street, the noise of the traffic bringing her back to reality. Grace walked aimlessly for hours. New York pulsed around her street vendors, hurried executives, tourists taking photos, but she saw nothing. She only felt. She felt the humiliation, the anger, the profound pain of being reduced to a price tag. When she finally stopped, she was in front of St. Patrick's Cathedral. She wasn't religious, but she went inside anyway. She sat in the last pew and for the first time in years allowed herself to truly cry. She cried for the girl who was rejected for not having enough class. She cried for the woman who built walls so high no one could climb them. She cried for the idiotic plan to test Thomas, which was now backfiring in ways she never imagined. She cried because she realized she wasn't testing Thomas, she was testing herself, her own capacity to be loved despite everything, and she had failed. Not because Thomas didn't love her, but because she herself didn't believe she deserved to be loved. The whole plan, all the lies, were just ways to confirm what she already believed, that she wasn't good enough. "I'm such an idiot," she said aloud to the empty altar. So stupid." The voice that answered came from behind her. "It's never too late to fix things." Grace turned. An elderly woman with white hair, dressed simply, was watching her with kind eyes. "Mrs. Foster." It was her neighbor from the second floor, the one who always had a kind word for everyone. Grace hadn't seen her in weeks. "May I sit?" Grace nodded. Mrs. Foster sat beside her in silence, allowing Grace to finish crying. "Troubles of the heart?" she finally asked. "Troubles of ... everything? Tell me," and Grace told her. Not everything, not about the hidden money, not about the full plan, but about Thomas, about his family, about feeling inadequate. Mrs. Foster listened without interrupting. When Grace finished, the older woman took her hand. "My dear, I'm going to tell you a story. When my husband asked me to marry him, I was 43. I'd already given up on love. But he insisted. Do you know what he told me?" Grace shook her head. "He said, 'Agnes, I don't choose you asterisk, despite asterisk who you are. I choose you asterisk exactly asterisk for who you are.' And then he listed everything, my wrinkles, my stubborn streak, my complicated past. And he said he loved every single part. How did you know it was real? Because he asterisk saw asterisk me. He truly saw me. And he stayed." Grace absorbed those words. Did Thomas see her, truly? Or did he only see the version of herself she had decided to present? "What do I do now?" she asked. "Tell the truth. To him and to yourself. What if he doesn't forgive me? Then it wasn't meant to be. But at least you will have been honest." Mrs. Foster stood, kissed the top of Grace's head as a mother would, and left the cathedral quietly. Grace stayed there for another half hour. And then she made the hardest decision of her life. She would not break up with Thomas because of Catherine. She would not take the money. She would not run. She would do the opposite. She would see the plan through to the end. The 6 months were almost up, only 3 weeks left. And at the end, at the engagement dinner Thomas had mentioned months ago, before everything fell apart, she would reveal everything. It would be the final test. Not of Thomas, but of herself. Could she confront her own fears? Could she choose the truth even knowing she might lose him? Grace left the cathedral with a clear plan. She called Thomas. "We need to talk. Grace, about what my mother did, double quotes, you know. David told me. He was there, in the building, saw you leave. Grace, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. But would you have stopped her?" Silence. "Thomas, I want you to propose to me." "What?" "I want an engagement dinner. With your family. 3 weeks from now. If you really choose me like you said, then prove it." Grace, I don't know if that's a good idea." "I do. And it's my only condition. You said you chose me. So choose. Publicly. In front of your mother, your brother, everyone." And that's when Grace did what no one expected. She forced Thomas to make a decision. The final confrontation was about to begin. And what she would reveal that night would not only change their fate, but also the way she saw herself forever. The restaurant Thomas chose was exactly what Grace expected. Elegant, expensive, exclusive. A private room reserved with a view of the skyline. 20 guests, family, close friends, a few business associates, all dressed impeccably, all looking at her with poorly disguised curiosity. Grace arrived 15 minutes late on purpose. She needed to make an entrance. When she pushed open the doors, all conversations stopped. She wore the same simple cotton dress from the beginning of the story. No jewelry, hair in its usual low bun, no-name shoes. She was the perfect picture of the inadequate fiancé. Thomas stood immediately, surprised. He had expected her to dress up for the occasion. Catherine and David exchanged significant looks. "See? She didn't even try." "Grace," Thomas kissed her cheek, whispering, "You look beautiful." "Thank you for doing this," she replied, loud enough for others to hear. Waiters brought champagne. Thomas made a short, nervous toast. "To new beginnings," he said, and everyone repeated it mechanically. Grace drank her champagne in 2 gulps. She needed courage for what came next. The dinner began. Side conversations filled the room. Grace remained silent for most of it, observing. Catherine spoke loudly about charity, social events, good people. David laughed at inside jokes with his friends. Jess, the only person Grace had invited, watched her with concern from the other end of the table. When the main course was served, Grace knew it was time. There would be no perfect moment. It had to be now. She stood up. The sound of her chair scraping back caught a few people's attention, then more. "May I have your attention?" she said, her voice cutting through every conversation. Thomas smiled, thinking it would be an emotional thank you. Of course. Grace took a deep breath. This was it. 6 months of lies about to be exposed. The entire plan culminating in this one instant. "I have to confess something. I've been lying to all of you. About who I really am." Thomas's smile died. Catherine sat up straight. David dropped his fork. "For the past 6 months, I've pretended to be poorer than I am. I never lost my job. In fact, I'm a partner in a business consulting firm. I live in that apartment because it's an investment, not because it's all I can afford." Total silence. 20 pairs of eyes fixed on her. I pretended because I needed to know if Thomas would love me when I had nothing. When I was just Grace, with no qualifications, no money, no status. I needed to know if his love was real. Thomas was pale. "You ... You lied? This whole time?" "I lied. Just like your mother lied when she offered me $50,000 to disappear from your life." Audible gasps. Catherine turned bright red. "That is absurd. Miss Julia Vance, Park Avenue, 20th floor. Shall I continue?" Catherine fell silent, but her eyes were blazing. Thomas looked from his mother to Grace, processing. "My mother did that?" "She did. And did you know?" "No. Of course not." "But would you have stopped her?" The question hung in the air like toxic smoke. "Grace, you are twisting everything." Catherine tried to regain control. "I did that to protect my son from an opportunist. And I did what I did to protect myself from men who say they love me until they find out I'm not good." "Enough." Grace turned to Thomas. Tears were finally falling, but her voice remained firm. "You said you chose me. But every time things got hard, you hesitated. When I lost my job, you pulled away. When the rumors started, you questioned me. When your mother interfered, you didn't confront her. I was trying to balance everything. Love isn't about balancing, Tom. It's about choosing, without hesitation. And you chose to lie. I chose to protect myself. Because 24 years ago, a man told me I didn't have enough class for his family, and it broke me. I built walls so high no one could get in. And when you came along, so kind, so perfect, I was terrified. Her voice cracked, but she pushed on. I was terrified to believe it. I was terrified of being rejected again, so I created an impossible test. And you failed. But I failed too. I failed to trust. I failed to be honest. I failed to believe that I deserved to be loved exactly as I am. The restaurant was absolutely silent. Even the waitstaff had frozen. Thomas had tears in his eyes. You don't trust me. You don't trust yourself. You've always let your mother decide. You've always put her opinion above your own. She's my mother, and I could have been your wife, but I can't compete with her. No one can. Catherine stood up. I've had enough of this melodrama. Sit down, Thomas thundered, and everyone startled. It was the first time anyone had ever seen him lose his composure. You offered her money to go away? The woman I love? How could you? I did what was necessary. Necessary for what? To keep me alone? To make sure I never have a life of my own? To make sure you didn't make a mistake? The mistake was trusting you to make my decisions for me. David tried to intervene. Tom. Quotes, shut up, David. You too. I saw you investigating Grace, asking questions, spreading doubts. You both decided you knew what was best for me, but you don't. Thomas turned to Grace. His eyes were red, but there was a clarity in them that wasn't there before. You lied, and that hurts. It hurts a lot, but I understand why. And the truth is, I deserved this test. Because every time you needed me, I hesitated. I put my family's opinion above my feelings. I was ashamed of you. He said it looking directly into her eyes. I was ashamed of you. Not because you were poor or unemployed, but because my family judged you, and I didn't have the courage to defend you as I should have. I failed you long before you ever tested me. Grace felt her legs grow weak. But right now, in front of everyone, I choose you. With the lies and the truths, with the fears and the courage. I choose to build something real, based on honesty, not family approval. He took her hand. Grace Thompson, you are difficult and stubborn and suspicious, but you are also the bravest woman I have ever met. And I love you. Not asterisk despite asterisk who you are. Asterisk exactly asterisk for who you are. Mrs. Foster's words. Exactly the same words. Grace sobbed. Thomas. But I need you to promise me one thing. No more lies. About anything. Not to protect me, not to test me. Total truth. Do you accept? Grace looked at this man who was finally asterisk, making a real choice. It wasn't a perfect choice. There was hurt to heal, trust to rebuild, but it was honest. I accept. Then marry me. For real this time. He pulled a small box from his pocket. The ring glittered under the restaurant lights. Grace looked around. Some guests were smiling. Others looked shocked. Jess was crying openly. Catherine was white-hot with rage, but silent. David was watching his brother with something that looked like respect for the first time. Yes, Grace said. I'll marry you. The room erupted in applause. Some of it genuine, some of it polite. But Grace didn't care. Because for the first time in 24 years, someone had chosen her. Publicly. Without hesitation. Catherine stood and walked out without a word. David followed her after giving Thomas a brief nod. A few other guests left as well, uncomfortable with the drama. But those who stayed made a point to congratulate the couple. Jess hugged Grace tightly. You did it, she whispered. We did it, Grace corrected. When everyone finally settled back down, Thomas held her hand under the table. We have a lot to talk about. About everything, I know. And it's not going to be easy. It never is. But we'll make it. Grace looked at the ring on her finger. It wasn't the perfect fairy tale ending. It was better. It was real. Messy. Complicated. Honest. We'll make it, she agreed. And for the first time in 6 months, Grace Thompson felt free. Free from the lies. Free from the fears. Free to finally be loved exactly as she was. 6 months later, Grace woke up to the smell of fresh coffee. Not at 5:30 anymore, but at 7, a luxury she had learned to allow herself. The apartment was different now. Not the one in Astoria, but not the townhouse on the Upper East Side either. She and Thomas had chosen a place together, somewhere in between. The West Village. A second-floor apartment. A balcony overlooking the trees. Thomas walked into the bedroom with 2 mugs. Good morning, Mrs. Sinclair. Grace smiled. She was still getting used to the new name. The wedding had been quiet. Just the essential witnesses. No Catherine. No David. A painful choice. But a necessary one. How was the call with your mother yesterday? She asked. Thomas sat on the bed. Short. She's still processing. But she said she might come for dinner next month. Progress. Slow. But progress. Catherine was in therapy, a requirement from Thomas to resume contact. The matriarch had resisted at first, but the fear of losing her son completely had convinced her. Their relationship was still fragile, full of difficult conversations and newly drawn boundaries, but it was being rebuilt. On honesty this time, not control. David had been quicker to come around. He had shown up 2 weeks after the dinner to apologize. "I just wanted to protect you," he'd told Thomas, "but I ended up trapping you." The brothers now had lunch every Thursday, with genuine conversation replacing the silent competition. Jess was radiant lately. Michael had passed away 3 months prior, peacefully, and while the grief remained, she had found something unexpected. She was falling in love with the hospice nurse who had cared for him in his final days. "Life is weird," she'd told Grace. "You find love in the most unlikely places." She was planning to sell her shop and open a small bookstore cafe, an old dream finally coming true. Mrs. Agnes Foster visited Grace every week. They had developed a deep friendship, the older woman becoming the mother figure Grace hadn't had in so many years. "You did the right thing," Mrs. Foster always repeated. "You chose the truth even when it was harder than the lie." Grace's consulting firm was thriving. With Thomas by her side as an emotional partner, not a financial savior, she had found the courage to expand. She now had 3 employees and a client wait list. The success was her own, not from connections or a last name, and Thomas had changed too. He'd taken firmer stances in the family company, overruling Catherine when necessary. He was learning that being a good son didn't mean being an obedient one. It was a daily process, but it was happening. That Saturday morning they had a special engagement. Thomas grabbed the car keys. Ready? Ready? The restaurant was the same one from that fateful night. Thomas had booked the same table, invited the same people, the ones who had stayed, the ones who truly mattered. When Grace walked in, this time holding Thomas's hand, the feeling was completely different. There was no nervousness, no lies weighing on her shoulders, just truth. Jess waved from the table. Mrs. Foster smiled warmly. Even David was there with a new girlfriend. "Why did we come back here?" Grace asked Thomas as they walked to the table. "Because we needed to rewrite this place. Create new memories over the old ones." They sat. Champagne was poured. Thomas stood up for a toast. 6 months ago, at this very table, everything fell apart. Lies were exposed. Hurts were revealed. And I almost lost the best thing that ever happened to me because of fear and cowardice. He looked at Grace. "Today we're back, but we're different. More honest, stronger, more ourselves." Grace stood beside him. "And today I can say without lies, without tests, without fear, I love you. And I trust you. I finally trust. To new beginnings. For real this time." "To new beginnings," everyone repeated. And this time, it sounded genuine. During dinner, Grace looked around the table. 6 months ago, she had felt like an intruder. Now she felt like she was home. Not because she had changed who she was, but because she had finally allowed herself to be seen. "What are you thinking about?" Thomas asked. "About how worth it is. Honesty. Even when it hurts, it's always worth it." And Grace realized something fundamental. Her entire life she had built protections, lies, walls, distance because she was afraid of being rejected. But those same protections guaranteed her rejection. No one could truly love her if they didn't truly know her. The test she had put Thomas through had revealed more about herself than it had about him. It had revealed her fears, her insecurities, her inability to trust. And confronting them, admitting them at that fateful dinner, had been the bravest act of her life. True love requires vulnerability. It requires risk. It requires the courage to be fully seen and to accept that not everyone will stay. But the ones who do, oh, they are worth every tear, every fear confronted, every painful truth told. Grace was no longer the invisible woman from Astoria. She wasn't the liar testing her boyfriend. She wasn't the victim of her circumstances. She was simply Grace, flawed and strong, with a past and a future, with truth. And for the first time in 52 years, that was enough. What about you? Have you ever found yourself testing someone because you were afraid to trust? Have you ever built walls so high that love couldn't get in? The truth is scary. Vulnerability is threatening. But they are also the only paths to real connection. Share your experience in the comments. How many times do we let fear decide for us? How many times do we choose protection over courage? Your words might be exactly what another woman needs to hear today. You are not alone on this journey. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your like if this story touched your heart. Next week, a story about second chances and new beginnings after 50. Remember, it's never too late to choose truth. It's never too late to choose courage. It's never too late to choose yourself. See you soon.